Yes, we are live. Ashika, start.
On behalf of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center of St. David's College, Kolkata, it is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. It is with utmost honor, privilege, and gratitude that I introduce to you a distinguished expert and inspirational leader, Mr. Suhas Misra. Mr. Misra is a visionary entrepreneur known for his remarkable contributions. His journey is a testament to the power of innovation, perseverance, and strategic thinking in transforming ideas into successful ventures. As the founder of Paperboat and CEO of Channel Play, Mr. Mishra has played a pivotal role in revolutionizing the ways brands connect with consumers. Paperboat, under his leadership, has become a household name, celebrated for its nostalgic yet innovative beverages that evoke the sense of India's heritage. Through Channel Play, he has further demonstrated his expertise in retail execution, helping brands build stronger market presence. We are beyond delighted to have you join us, sir, and share your invaluable insights, experiences, and expertise with our participants today. We are extremely thankful to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to engage with us in this session. On behalf of everyone here at EDCIC, I extend my best wishes to all participants for an insightful and inspiring learning experience during this session. I now hand over the proceedings of the meeting to you.
Thank you, Ashika. Thank you, everyone. Uh, One of the things I've realized is that in all conversations I now have at this age and stage in life, it is important for me to put cards on the table about why am I here. And I often ask myself that question going into any meeting: that why am I doing this? And that usually sets up a good conversation. So I thought I'll bring the same philosophy to this and just share in my preamble why am I here. Um, so it also helps set the agenda. So often a talk like this, to the speaker, I've been on this speaker side a few times, and there is, if one is not careful, one thinks of it as some sort of intergenerational bargain for the civilization to pass on wisdom. I think those things are very fraught with assorted risks because you should never be sure of the wisdom of the speaker because more likely than not, they have themselves fumbled their way into something and are now telling you a neat story in the retrospective. So that this is not that I'm not thinking I have enough wisdom to impart some to you. Um, so I was thinking, why would I say yes to a talk like this? And the second likely explanation in my mind was that, like most engineer MBA types, if a place like Xavier says, come talk to us, it scratches some formative itch because these places, a place like Xavier is seen more as an intellectual, uh, kind of venue, as it were, even though this is digital. And it makes scratches the intellectual itch, therefore. I have enough of a Calcutta connection to feel a little bit of that, to feel happy to be talking of with a bunch of young people from Xavier's. But that's not really the answer. So if I think about it, a platform like this for a speaker like me essentially is some sort of self-indulgent way, is like self-indulgent telling of my story. Um, and you end up turning up at something like this assuming that I'm going to tell my story to an audience of the willing. I hope you are an audience of the willing. One can never be sure why people have gathered to listen to something, uh, but just to assure me of it being an audience of the willing, wherever in whatever I say, if you feel like you have to say, hey, I have a question, I would prefer that. Obviously, Pradyum told me that there will be some time for Q&A at the end, but good storytelling often is interactive. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to imply too much wisdom. Therefore, feel free to say, hey, I have a question. But we'll do the Q&A at the end anyway, either way you prefer. But I would quite like it if when you have a question, you shoot it out. Um, the team which organized this sent me three topics. I skipped the first one, which was around navigating fundraising, partnerships, and exits. I'll be very happy to take those questions in the Q&A if you have some. I'm quite curious if you have a question around that, but if you have, I'll try to answer it as honestly as I can. The second topic was around transforming ideas into iconic products. I thought I'll go with that. And the third topic was the one which, is in that category for me where I say if I had $1 for every time I'm asked that, so which is this building a brand with emotional connect, the paper boat example. Happy to talk about that also. So I suppose my talk sits somewhere between the second and third. Like, what does it mean to be an iconic product? And how do you go about that? And also enough examples from the early paperboat journey. Uh, so I'm hoping that the organizers would be happy because I'm sort of saying three in one within 1 hour. So that should be higher utilitarian value from the conversation. Also, because I've already talked of the story, it is in large part a segue to the first of a few slides that I have handy. Let me just share my screen. Broadcast. I will have to know if it is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, sir, it's visible.
Okay. And because it's my screen, I will... Oh, actually, I'm on a new device. So sorry about this being a little bit cumbersome. Now, can you see my screen?
Yeah, sir.
It says this is about storytelling. I hope it is visible properly. Not able to do much from this end. Um, the idea of talking about the story is basically that has. Is that on the screen? Sorry, I'm just checking this again.
Yeah, sir, that disappeared.
Okay, 1 minute. This must make for a clunky YouTube live if it is going live, but sorry about that. I suppose you can see it now.
Yeah, sir.
Got it. So I wanted to talk about storytelling because if I look back and say, what is an iconic product? Like, how do you transform an idea into an iconic product? Or even talk of how do you build a brand with emotional connect? Essentially, it is about the story. Now, the the point of saying it's about the story is not to say that it is independent of the product, because when it comes to storytelling and marketing, the product is the substance of the story. And the story has a lot of attributes, but without a good product, there is no good story to tell, or at least not in a reliable way. Um, I suppose that the reason for my being here requires me to quickly talk about, why do I get to be storyteller and you get to be audience? So a quick, broad highlights of what I've been up to. Um, this would have started with saying, "Oh, I grew up in Lucknow, and then I did this, did that." But just taking a formative point, which was going to IIM Calcutta back in the day, and it was a time when what I now refer to as pre-entrepreneurship, because in post-liberalization India, this was a time when all of us growing up in the great Indian middle class were very excited by the draw of the corporate world. And when you got to a place like IIM Calcutta, any of the IIMs, I suppose, in the early 2000s, everybody around you was very excited that now your life is set and you'll have these massive salaries and, all the glamour of the new corporate world which had emerged after India's liberalization in the 90s. And so this was a time for me when I look back that I kind of had lots of thoughts on becoming an entrepreneur with one of my closest friends, my closest friend Sandeep, with whom I later started Channel Play. Um, but it was a time when there was not much known about the specifics of entrepreneurship. So, kind of before, a session like this would have happened, or even before venture capital happened, or all the news of entrepreneurship, this and that, which has been great to see as having become an entrepreneur before all this happened. But all said, after my MBA, joined Coca-Cola, suspending all the entrepreneurship ideas, learned a lot at Coke, still don't drink Pepsi. Uh, in fact, still judge people who are drinking Pepsi, which is kind of irrational, but it is what it is. And then joined Nokia. All of you are quite young, so I don't know. I should tell you, Nokia used to make phones. Uh, do you do you know Nokia? Any of you, if you can unmute and tell me, do you know this brand? It used to have 90 odd percent share of the Indian market. Like I said, I would like it to be interactive, and I don't know if you are thinking this is some made up brand. Uh, I was too junior to be responsible for Nokia's subsequent fall in share, disappearance. So I'm in no way to be held responsible. Was there for just about a year, less than a year. So even so. Then started Channel Play. Hey, can somebody unmute and say something because I'm not sure I'm getting through.
Yes, so we do know about Nokia.
Okay, good. Good to know. Basically, when you deliver a joke like that, you want some feedback. So I thought you would know Nokia, but it was anyway. So then Channel Play happened, and Channel Play, as a story still goes on. Sandeep and I, we were in very different parts of the world, and he was working on one very cutting edge project with Walmart to figure out tech in the channel. And I was at Coca-Cola in Rajasthan at that time, and in a very pen and paper world. So, like with close friends, we often would exchange notes and say, hey, listen, eventually all of this will become much more tech enabled, everything that people do in the channel. And from that founding premise started Channel Play. Uh, when I say myth making for Paperboat, essentially it's my myth, because it turned out to be the thing which everyone wants to talk about. And I'm very happy for it. It opens all sorts of conversation beautifully. And we'll talk more about it through the presentation. But I'll quickly share that, when we were thinking, this friend of mine from my Coca-Cola days, Neeraj, and therefore working with co-founders is a recurring theme in my life. Um, and Neeraj and I always had this thought that we'll do something together, and entrepreneurship was just about getting started in India, one could say, at least the entrepreneurship of people like us. I mean, I suppose there are enough people struggling and trying to sell things. Retail is the great Indian entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship of people like us was becoming cooler and more acceptable. And Neeraj and I were discussing what should we do. And we said, we were good at selling Coca-Cola, so we should figure out something around beverages broadly. We had a lot of ideas. We launched some other beverages, some of which did well, some of which we don't like to recall now unless we are in a very small group, because they kind of disappeared without a trace. Um, it was fun times, and early stage entrepreneurship creates stories. We would be mixing various things in our kitchen and saying, okay, let's drink this, let's try this. And the idea developed slowly, and the idea developed very real time, having already started the beverage company to figure out what is a beverage which makes sense in India. And the time when Coca-Cola had already exposed us to, at least these questions, even though large companies end up not being very good at doing smaller things, which is why in most industries there's a pattern that large companies are aware of smaller spaces, but somehow are not able to get their ideas into execution when it comes to smaller opportunities which might grow a lot. It's one of those interesting, almost paradoxes because these large companies can afford all kinds of talent. But somehow, when it comes to a smaller opportunity, like an opportunity which is small today and will be big tomorrow, it ends up not really happening within a large company. And I suppose that the whole paperboard space was not like I don't give it that much credit for an idea because all of us grew up with these beverage ideas, like an Ampana or an Amras or so on and so forth. But it is that it requires a small company to get into it and build a brand, which is one of the most interesting things in entrepreneurship I have experienced because very often an outsider would ask that, if this is so exciting, typically, let's say an investor would say, oh, if this Ampana is such a big opportunity as you are saying, why would Coke or Pepsi not just do it? And it took us a lot of energy and explanation to go through that cycle to explain why. Uh, and there are all sorts of reasons for that. Why, if some of you are interested, you can ask me about it now, or in the Q&A, we can go deeper in it. But otherwise, moving on. Um, at some stage, I think 6 odd years down the Hector Beverages journey, I exited and decided to go on other adventures, which is why I call it the Don Quixote phase. Like I was thinking, okay, should I study more? Should I do this? It was great times because that was a good exit. And I was thinking, okay, I can reimagine what I want to do from first principles and had lots of interesting dabbling into healthcare and anthropology and whatnot. Won't bore you with those stories because those stories are away from the business world. And then at some stage, around 2.5 years back, I came back to actively running my first venture, which I co-founded with my close friend from the I Am Calcutta days, Sandeep Holani. And we are, it's a mid-sized company now, and we're trying to make it a big company. So there were some exciting times afoot. And plus, as co-founders, and very close friends, we always thought we should be able to make the co-founding and co-running of a company happen. If any two people could be able to make it happen, it should be us. In a nutshell, that is my story, and I suppose that is my right to be telling you this. Uh, all of this. Moving on. So, when one thinks of storytelling in marketing, it really isn't that different from storytelling in general. Uh, and and therefore, marketing as a function is is an interesting function because it takes so much from other disciplines. Like it takes so much from literature, like a claim like this. And I make a claim like this, if you think about it, uh, where in what field of study do you think about what constitutes a good story? And it is the study of literature. uh, in and then related to it is the whole field of psychology. So I often feel that the marketeer, as opposed to say a person specializing in operations or manufacturing, has to be a, a person of varied interests. You should be willing to read a novel knowing that it is for work, or watching a big blockbuster film which may or may not suit your taste, knowing it is for work, but also going deep into, say, some writings in psychology to understand attributes of a good story. What impacts us when we come across a good story? How are we moved by a good story? So, at the risk of too grand a project for a 1 hour talk, um, I will try to take a shot at this. So, what are universal attributes of a good story? Because I think this is where this theme of transforming an idea into an iconic product, brand rather, uh, requires the person with the idea to become a storyteller. If you could unmute and tell me, are there any people here who study literature?
No, sir.
No. Most people are studying, I imagine, commerce or business.
Yeah, sir. Mostly commerce, yeah, business management and stuff.
I'm disappointed. I'm joking. I turned up thinking there'll be a lot of interesting people who are studying literature and history and all that. But I suppose that's another stereotype. Anyway, we will. I'm kidding. I'm not disappointed. The point of analyzing what a good story is, and then what a good story is in marketing, essentially is that let's just look at what a story is. When does a story make sense for us? So I have this some broad principles. I think a good story um, always starts in the middle. A good story is a story where the marketer is confident, does not bother with setting context. If you think about it, all of the great stories, like if you think of the Mahabharata, Ramayana, or across culture, right? Iliad, all the epics, they do not start saying this happened, this is when I was born, and then this. They are not chronological. They mess with time. They do not bother to explain context because they know that in its substance, people understand it. I'll give you an example. We were thinking of one copy for a product which we had launched, which was at in the paperboard phase, Kala Khatta, and we always had to find a good angle of what goes on the back of the pack to talk about the product, or or even what kicks off social media for a particular product. And I vaguely remember the story. So broadly, what we said was that, Kala Khatta, what is the noun? What is the adjective? Uh, uh, if only I could go back and ask Mrs. Edwards. It was so tangential, right? Like, who's Mrs. Edwards? What is this noun adjective talk? But what it relied on was that somewhere all of us, or a lot of us, had somebody who was trying to teach us noun and adjective, and played with a memory which was surprisingly universal.
Hello, sir.
Very sorry, Pradip. I don't know how that usually our internet is backed up. Can
Yes,
you hear me?
not a problem. Yeah, you're audible now, sir.
Yes. Sorry about that. I don't know how our office network gave way so quickly with the power cut. I'm in Bangalore. It shouldn't happen. This is where all the anyway. Hey, I'm not getting anything from you guys. Are you following anything I'm saying before I share my screen? Does someone want to say something, ask me something? I'll feel very happy.
Yeah, so we actually are following up like whatever it is given in the presentation.
So
So
someone has a question, something, please ask right now. Again, it'll help me go. I think Mayank is trying to say something, Mayank, but you're not audible.
Mayank, you're not audible. You can try speaking louder.
Or maybe go off that. Okay, Mayank, you'll figure it and ask it when you will. I will, in the interest of time, go through this presentation and come back to you in the Q&A. Uh, Here we go. So I was saying a good story starts. A good story has conceit. A very interesting word because, for example, the book which got the Booker Prize this year, the last Booker Prize, it is essentially about saying, I will write this story from the International Space Station. Now, that's wonderful conceit because you can imagine the rest of the novel following through. So, conceit is different from plot. A plot is like what happened, and I guess I don't need to explain plot. Um, Character is a very interesting point because all good stories need characters which we can relate to. We can like, love, hate, etc. Basically, how does a brand become a character? And in a very interesting way, it also points to the overall process through which we look at the world. Like we want to see characters even where none exists, even in an inanimate object. The human mind takes us to seeing character. It is a way we process the world. And the last point, the most important point in my mind is interiority. Like, is there an examination of what is going on in the mind of the consumer or the reader? And it's interchangeable because, in a way, the marketer is the storyteller. That what is the point in an interior monologue which my brand gets connected to in a recurring interior monologue. Because if you think about it, where does nonfiction diverge from fiction? Uh, Nonfiction can never tell us what was going on in somebody's mind. So if someone says Caesar crossed the Rubicon, we nonfiction can tell us the fact. But somebody who's attempting a novel or with Caesar as a central character will probably add some conceit that while Caesar was taking this grand step, he really had to meet someone in Rome uh, later in the evening for dinner. Or that he was thinking, I wonder, like it can be surprising. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be about the taking of Rome, but it is an examination of what is going on in a character's mind. So a novel about Caesar can take a shot at it. It will be wrong, most likely, but it is a shot we will relate to. Why? Because we will find that somewhere in our mind, something that was going on in that mind. And that only a story can do. Non-fiction cannot do that. So on this slide are a few points which a student of literature would get immediately. But I submit to people who want to take their ideas and tell stories. They are not in particular order, but I just wanted to quickly talk about these. Uh, I'll just give one more example before moving on to Q&A in the interest of time. And I wanted to take this example from social media because these brands happened when social media was already there. So even today, I find this a lot like a brand saying, we must celebrate something. Like they come up with a calendar. A social media person will come up with a calendar saying, this month we will celebrate this festival. And you then start seeing post after post of brand after brand on the same topics. So I wanted to share one story of one social media post just to illustrate the point of storytelling. And I will, after this, quickly move to the Q&A. I'll again request someone to unmute and confirm that this audience knows Vivian Richards broadly, or does it sound like a name
We know
of
Sir Vivian
us?
Richards, so
Yeah,
we
I
know.
was counting on that.
You know,
So I remember this time when, as a paperboard, we said, Vivian Richards had such an impact on our childhood because this is now 10 years back, and we were talking to 30-year-olds who were, kids when Vivian Richards was batting, and we all grew up with some trauma from Vivian Richards because he would score a lot of runs and too fast, just too fast, and destroy the opposition. And I think he also took apart the Indian attack very regularly. So it was Vivian Richards' birthday. Someone would have done some Google search and said, today, Paperboat will wish Vivian Richards happy birthday, which is great. But then, if you think about it, that is very generic, right? Like you can just tell the story. Uh, any brand can wish anyone. It's content, it's mindless content. What is your right to take that content? So what happened after this was a process in which our team, all of us got together and said, what is our relationship to with Vivian Richards? And then people started telling each other their stories, their memories of Vivian Richards. And they were very real. And they were real enough that suddenly a marketing meeting felt like a storytelling meeting, like you're hanging out and someone's telling you something. And then the one recurring story that we all had of Vivian Richards was of this time in the 1983 World Cup when India had that small target, and they made a film on that later. I don't like that film, but still, it's a big enough moment for there to be a film uh, where he's batting and taking away the match from India, and there was this time I remembered when, as a kid, as a 5-year-old kid, I had this vague memory of how on radio the commentator says something like, and Richards has gone for it again. And then because there were so many fours and sixes already, we were thinking it's again going. But then there was a silence on the radio commentary. And we all felt something in the silence because everyone sort of, instead of feeling how you do when your team is getting hammered, there was hope in that silence. Like on radio, silences mattered a lot. and and everyone in the room fell silent, and then suddenly there was this thing that Kapil's going for it and he's still going on, and he has caught it, right? That the great catch, which is part of Indian mythology, as it were. But remembering that as a lived memory, I think that is what infused the brand with an authenticity, which kind of is my point, that it is very easy to think of content as something that sits atop a brand. But the game essentially is to find a way in which your brand has a right to tell a story. And then to tell the story in as real a way, as felt a way. And that became our social media post, like the whole description and that moment, and then the collective cheer. And it did very well. It was the moment when we knew that this story works. It emerges from the product because it was a time of Ampana and Amras having just gone to market. But we knew that this story is almost organically coming out of the product. Like all of it is together. And so the pressure on the marketer, therefore, again, is to go deep into realizing or identifying what is a story that you can tell, given who you are and given what your product is. The marketer has to figure out what is the most organic story, what is the story that you can tell, which nobody else can tell. Every brand can wish Sir Vivian Richards happy birthday, but to tell the story of your feeling as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old when that match was happening, authentically is a rare right, is a unique right. And if you examine your brand and product and your own personality enough, you get a right to tell a certain story in a way that no one else can tell. In a way that if someone else copies, it will feel inauthentic. And as a corollary, yours is the authentic telling of the story. And more such examples, but we are doing slightly poorly on time. I'm doing slightly poorly on time. I would, and also I'm not hearing enough from people. So I'm just wondering if we could go to some Q&A and we can have some real conversation. Um, I would really like that. So I'm breaking from the deck.
Sure. So, if you don't mind, I'll ask the question now. So, like one of the questions that we were asked was, how are you dealing with the shifting trends of consumer preferences, especially regarding artificial sweeteners and natural ingredients that exist in the market? If
Yeah. So well, first of all, what I'm speaking for Paperboat is not in its like I know what happened there. Neeraj is a good friend of mine, but I'm speaking in an informal capacity because I'm not running the company anymore. So I think as a brand, Paperboat is very aware that it has to be with the broad health trends. They're not just temporary shifts in anything. These are good for the world and therefore likely to go on in a self-enforcing way. There is a lot of work happening on artificial sweeteners, and Neeraj is an amazing beverage nerd. Whenever I meet him, he tells me about something that they're looking at. So I can see some products which have come out, are coming out, which have erythritol, which is a great sweetener. There will be more of that because the interesting thing is that as a brand, you owe the consumer two things. You owe the consumer joy and you owe the consumer goodness. And the goodness part doesn't always naturally reconcile. So I'm giving a broad answer, but my sense is that the goodness of a product and the joy of a product are often locked in a trade-off. um, it's a fascinating thing, right? Like, even if we go outside Paperboat and think about the world, uh, a lot of our joy from food comes from complex carbs, especially complex carbs in combination with fat, or complex carbs in combination with fat and sugar. Uh, Even as we know that this is not a great combination, probably we know this is a bad combination for us. You think about it, this is a larger arc. So it's not just an artificial sweetener story. There's a larger arc. Like the market is telling you both things. Um, and what you have to do is be on an iterative journey that can you keep bringing joy while keep making the product better for the body. It's a very interesting question. It has always fascinated me because you know if you if you think about this irony that what people state that they want and what people want, there is an interesting attitude behavior mismatch, and product companies have to be very aware of both. So I often see a diatribe, not just about, say, this beverage brand, but classic big beverage brands also, that they are selling such whatever stuff. But the market is telling you both things. So you have to be iterative. You have to keep going on a journey when you experiment with more things, when you keep bringing newer things to market. And it is very important to square the two. So long story short, the answer is that as a company, Hector Beverages is constantly thinking of uh, what are great products for people's health, but it also owes the consumer joy. And the two are an interesting ongoing journey, like that trade-off. So there are lots of products which are zero sugar now, uh, 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 and it is an ongoing process. Great work has happened on artificial sweeteners, like from the time when I was at Coca-Cola, and I never liked Diet Coke because of aspartame. Even though we used to get it free, and those days it was such a kick to get an expensive product free, but I couldn't drink any Diet Coke despite that because it was just this alien sweetness. And current sweeteners are getting better, and paperboard products are, the zero range is using these sweeteners. Um, it's an ongoing journey, but it's a great question. Ongoing journey. To
Thank
the
you so
long
much,
speech,
sir,
I
for
didn't want to avoid the answering. I hope I've answered the question.
no, no, so you have completely answered the question, and we are really thankful for that. Moving on, we had another question, like going back to what you said earlier about how it was challenging to, explain to the investors why the big players like Coca-Cola or Pepsi couldn't do what Paperboard did. So, like,
Uh,
how did you deal with such a situation, and what exactly was your, take on that, if you could please write in.
so at that time, we all had our answers because we were pitching, together as a group to different investors. I can give you my take on it. And my take broadly was that if you think at the top of an organization, where does power sit? So the power sits where there is the biggest business, very simply. So at a large company, if they are saying, let's launch some new products, I won't name any company in particular. Those days we used to name companies in particular. But with the age, I have fonder memories of Coca-Cola. But if you just think of a large company and suppose it sells five products and one product accounts for 80% of the sales, and now this company says, hey, we have to launch a sixth product because this new category adjacent to us is happening in whatever way. Now, the person who's handling the 80% revenue, whether they be the marketing person, they will have 80% of the resources, give or take. The person who is managing the sales team, they'll have 80% of the resources, give or take. That person who in that organization's own meritocracy will be the organization's strongest person. Now, if you go to this person and say, hey, listen, why don't you go to this zero thing, the sixth thing we are going to do? This person will essentially say, are you kidding me? I have all this contextual power. I'm the one who signs the big celebrity. I'm the one who, has like 15,000 people in whatever hierarchy reporting into me. This person, situationally, very unlikely to say, yeah, let me go and do this zero thing, right? Now, what the organization does is say, okay, maybe not the biggest chunk of business, maybe the second biggest chunk. That person also feels so. Then they also feel, oh, it's a big risk category. It may work and might do great things for my career, but it may not work and it might do bad things for my career. And they are not entrepreneurs. So that risk return profile is not right because they are in the corporate world. In the corporate world, there is nothing wrong with seeking the safety of scale and running things and incremental growth. That is what that whole world shareholder value is determined for. Other shareholder looking for higher risk, higher reward is here in the small company, is not even a shareholder of the large company. So one, it creates a dichotomy at the top, or you don't find the right person. So you end up finding the worst person who raises their hand and say, "Give me the sixth thing." Very often, they are the ones who are not doing well in the company, but they cannot be fired, like to put it simply. So that person goes and leads this new sixth thing. If you cut to dramatically the bottom of the hierarchy, say a salesperson going store to store, again taking five things. Now, those five things sell easier. In the sixth thing, you might have to, like we had to when we launched Paperboard, to a lot of retailers, we had to open the pack, therefore take it chilled. Like, think of the logistics of it. But if there's a running brand, a large brand, you just stop in the summer and the retailer shouts, give me 5 cases or 50 cases, depending on their scale. You quickly do the transaction, you move on, your throughput is greater, and you do more business, therefore you make more money. It is painful for that person also at the bottom of the hierarchy to go and sample this thing and say, enjoy this flavor of jeera or this, or, all the talk that goes into it, very difficult. So this used to be my story, that right at the top and right at the bottom, and therefore by extension, everywhere in the middle, the large organization is not hardwired. The second thing we used to do to cement this claim was we used to study the global industry a lot. And over the last 60, 70 years, we had all this data about how all the large beverage brands have happened globally. And therefore, research is very important to answer such a question, because on the other side, when you are talking to investors, you should know that they thrive on research. Like, they hire people who can research. Some of you who are interested in it will become that person. Like those who, you look for jobs where they say this person is this analyst. Now imagine bright young folks like yourself dedicating 40, 50 hours to one specific topic like that. So as an entrepreneur, you have to be as research and therefore answer it with research. So we used to study global beverage brands a lot and say, this is not a unique to India story we are telling. Small ideas, large companies struggle with. We will try to make this happen. So it was a journey. We got a lot of no's in the beginning, and the venture capital space in India was still quite small. So at some stage, we were starting to wonder what have we gotten ourselves into. But fortunately, we kept telling the story to enough people, and fortunately, the right investors backed us at the right time.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. That was really insightful. We have a question from the YouTube chat now. So
Mm.
they said that we have learned today that good storytelling is extremely important for a brand. But lately, we have seen that ads that use shocking or unrelated content to grab attention and then simply add humor to it. Is this a new way of storytelling or just a way to deal with people's short attention span?
I think much is made of people's short attention span. I have learned to see more nuance in it. When I talk to young people, it's not like they've lost all attention. Like a lot of times, it is intergenerational. This saying, "Oh, these days people have no attention span." I'm pretty sure when we were kids, adults would have said, "Oh, they have no attention span," and those days they might have worried about Doordarshan because we had only one channel. But even that transition was a big one. So my broad sense is that this attention span thing is a real thing. How we consume information, it is changing. People have to consume information in smaller bites, and not in long form has some struggle. The thing about shocking things is an interesting point. It has always existed. And the marketing textbook will tell you this. There are certain categories where it is important for you to have absolute top of mind recall. There are certain categories, most categories don't require absolute top of mind recall. They require it to be in a consideration set so that when you see it, you remember it as a good option. So on the absolute impulse end of the spectrum, advertising was always just about clutter breaking. It's not just now, it's just that the medium has changed. So if you think of categories such as chewing gums back in the 90s also, and look at those ads, you will find dramatically, you know, impulse generating ads, right? Um, so the important thing is that shock value or not, and I think shock value has a role, but shock value or not, the connection between an advertising message and a brand is not self-evident. Like the marketer has to think of what is the connection. So I've noticed a lot of cases now and over the last 20 years in this space that where people remember an ad more and then say, I can't recall which brand was it for. And it's a very real thing because, sometimes your ad can be so disruptive that people refer to it as the story. So the pressure on the marketer, as opposed to, let's say, a creative person at an ad agency, is to say, how does this creative message break clutter enough for me to get the kind of recall I need in my category? So, for example, a high involvement category like, let's say, a refrigerator, if it utilizes an ad which has great shock value, the risk it is running is that one, it may not be establishing the connection between the ad and the brand. Second, the recall it needs might be aided recall. So that when I go into a shopping environment, digital or physical, I see the brand and I say, hey, I know this brand, let me consider it. Um, so this type of recall changes a lot. I'm not belittling the use of shock value, but I do not think it's increased. First of all, I'm not even sure it has increased. We have had campaigns which were shock value even when print was a primary medium. People not here, but back in the day when I was on campus, like I am Calcutta, the ad prof used to talk a lot about the tough ad, which was the big controversial ad with a python around these two people, supermodels. And that visual was very big for our generation when we were in our early 20s. So shock value has always existed. The challenge still remains when can you deploy it? Which category can you deploy it? And while creating shock and therefore high recall for the ad or the creative, can you still connect it to recall for the brand? So that hasn't changed. And I therefore wouldn't put the shock value, I wouldn't connect it to attention spans. Also, I feel that too many conversations these days start with attention span. That situation is interesting with social media, but it is not everything. So I think shock value as a concept in advertising has been there, summarizing. But how do you connect it to create recall for your brand rather than end up creating recall for the shock of it? Will still be a challenge, and what type of recall?
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. So now my friend Saisha would be giving the vote of thanks for the session.
As we conclude this insightful session, we are confident that the invaluable perspective shared today will guide our attendees in their future endeavors. Mr. Suhas Misra has truly exemplified the spirit of entrepreneurship, inspiring us with his journey transforming ideas into iconic products and navigating the challenges of innovation. On behalf of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center of St. Xavier's College Autonomous Kolkata, I extend a heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Suhas Mishra for sharing his wealth of knowledge and expertise with us today. A special mention to our respected principal, Reverend Dr. Dominic Savio S.J., and Vice Principal, Reverend Dr. Joseph Kulandai S.J., Reverend Dr. Peter Arogyam S.J., and Professor Bertram da Silvia for continuously encouraging us to pursue greatness and live up to the great Xaverian reputation. I also extend heartfelt thanks to our faculty advisor, Dr. Arup Kumar Misra, for his steadfast guidance and support at every step. We sincerely acknowledge our attendees for being patient, interactive, and for posing such thought-provoking questions. Last but not the least, I extend deep appreciation to the members of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center for the dedication, timely execution, and unwavering support in organizing this event. The credit form will now be rolled out in the YouTube live chat. All attendees are requested to fill it immediately. Once again, thank you all for tuning in with APCIC and have a pleasant day.
Thank you, everyone. Love talking to you. Wish it was in person, but